All right, Hoosier, let's kick this thing off.
I tell you what, just cracked open the Red Bull, so here we go. It's always the way to start these things. That's my new thing. It's like a crutch. All right, well, we're gonna talk about some student management today, right? If you've been following what we've been doing at Strive Education on our YouTube channel, you'll know that me and Taylor, who's also on this call, have kind of discussed this in a podcast episode. So some of it's repeat, but some of it's taking it even deeper, an even deeper dive into um, both the aspects of having a class or a club, right? Because we recognize our programs can be either of them. And so we want to kind of showcase things that work for both sides. Um, and then some of the individual and uniqueness about whether it's a full blown class or it's just a club. So, as you can see, the five things: recruiting, onboarding, role assignment, SOPs, which we call standard operating procedures, and kind of documenting your knowledge, then scheduling and conflict, because those two can't happen without each other, and then recognition and ownership, right? And I like this. We want to share what worked and what didn't, and that's part of what Jordan's going to be doing from his perspective. And Trey, since we got you on here, we'll ask you here. When we have some of those questions, kind of to get your feedback and perspective as a teacher. And if you're watching this after the fact, let us know in the comments something that worked or didn't work if you've tried any of this. But the failures teach us more than the highlights. And I'm a big Formula One fan, and that's one of the quotes that one of their best racers said in the acceptance speech. He said, "I learned more from losing than I did from winning." Um, and so obviously we don't want failure to become a habit, right? We want to learn and grow from it, but it is okay to try something and have it not work and be like, "Gotcha, that didn't work," right? And because we have a community, we're able to fail and learn and share so that you save maybe five other teachers from trying that thing and failing. And so we're all getting better at the same time. So that is the big goal of the community, and kind of the summer series is sharing those lessons so that um, nobody's failing over the same thing. So the 4 week map, here's where we are. We're on week 3. Obviously, we started week 1 with gear and equipment, then did some broadcast graphics. Each of those went over an hour. I think the first one was an hour and 20 minutes. I think the second one was like an hour and 23 minutes. So we'll see how long we decide to go today. But hey, it's all good stuff, and so I don't have a problem going long, because we really want to do a deep dive for you guys. So we're here on week 3 with student management, and then next year will kind of be, I call it the week that ties it all together, right? So we did these 3 weeks of of topics, and now we get to week 4. Because if you're not program building, it doesn't matter that you have a good student management system in place, or that you have a good broadcast graphics routine in place, or that you have a plan for gear and equipment, right? So um, again, 4 Mondays that make a difference. We're on week 3. So the first one we're going to start with is recruiting and onboarding, right? Because it's important. Like, we talk about student-led broadcasting. Well, can you do that without students? The answer is no, because it's in the name, right? And so basically, you have to recruit and onboard, whether that's getting them to sign up for your class if you have a class, or if it's more of an after-school thing, extracurricular, you have to get the word out that says, "Hey, we're interested in getting more students to be a part of this. How do we do it?" So, uh, Jordan, will kind of let you kind of take this over and kind of talk about recruiting, onboarding, and how you've kind of attacked it over the years.
Yeah, so I've grown from 6 kids to this year will now be, I think, 62, I think is where I'm officially at. And he'll probably have a few drops. We'll just say 60. And so that's been over really 5 years. Started out with a club for 2 years, which I don't count. And then the class is where I officially counted. If I go look at those 2 years, we made a lot of progress and growth there, and got kids motivated and going. I just only count the class years for me, mainly because I was fighting my soul away with administration trying to get the class to happen. And so it was really me pushing and pushing and pushing the envelope for sure those first 2 years. And it turned into a little chaos because I didn't have a lot of structure in place. But my whole goal was to get it so I had enough kids to make it a class and really kind of start growing it from there. And so I had to prove to them that that's what needed to happen. And finally, I think they are now seeing the fruits of the labor and realizing, oh, this is an important thing and can be beneficial to not only the athletic side but the academic side and for our students. So that part's been kind of neat to see. But first off, attitude over skill. That is a huge one for me because I got 60 kids in it. Not all of them have all the skills, and some of them definitely have the attitude where they're just there to get their grade. They want to just go with the flow, do as bare minimum as possible, and still move on. And then I've got the others on the other side of the spectrum that they're there every night trying to find new ways and to improve and get better and grow. And so attitude over skill is definitely a big one. So if you can find those kids that have that good attitude, that are wanting to push the show to the next level, those are the ones you definitely want to lean on and keep. And those are the ones you want to try to reach out to and say, hey, we need more people like you. So get your friends and buddies that are going to do a good job, not just there to be there. And that's where I kind of ran into a little bit of a struggle probably 2 or 3 years ago where I said, hey, I need as many people as I can. So go out and reach out to anybody you know. Got them all in there. And I had a class, I think, of 32 that year. And then I had a class of really about 8 is what it ended up boiling down to. The other, whatever the math is on that, was they didn't really care. They were just there to get the grade. They heard it was fun and easy, and they did a good job. It wasn't that they weren't doing a good job, but they just weren't there to make things better. And so you can definitely teach someone to run a switcher. You can teach someone to announce, teach someone to run replay, graphics, all that stuff. But you can't necessarily teach them to care about the show. If you teach them how to do those things, a lot of times they will end up getting attached and hooked on it and really want to get better and better at it. But sometimes that was a struggle, especially there early, trying to get them to care about what's going on. And that's a continuous struggle, to be honest. Now, 60 kids, I don't have that relationship that I did with the crew when I had 12 of them as a club the second year. Like I do pretty much every single one of them and can help them and assist them. And then we've got so large now that there's a lot of roles that I'll talk to you throughout the night, but I am definitely not going to be putting a ton of energy and effort necessarily towards you. And so I have to watch that as myself. Like, how can I make sure I'm still making these connections with these kids, even whether it's just on headsets or getting up to their position up in the press box, whatever it might be. So attitude over skill, the class versus club reality. Class work with who shows up. Club is retention is everything. Recruiting, trying to keep those kids motivated and exciting. Because I think, like Trey said, he's got 6 kids and they were doing everything. Like that can be exhausting sometimes. Just like for the teachers, like working all these games, getting everything set up for them can be difficult from time to time. So keeping those kids excited, not overworking them at the club level, like that was something we just did. Not nearly as many games we do now. When we first started, I did 100, I think 45 games last year. And so that was at the class level with that many kids. And I wasn't at every single one of them, but we still had to make sure we tried to keep that same standard alive and really going. And at the club level, we just hit the kind of the big ones that were really important. And then if there was a game that didn't get something, it just didn't happen. And that was kind of a bummer for me because my goal was to get everything covered. And so now we've luckily got to that, but it's taken some work and going from there. And then the onboarding gap, bad onboarding, number one reason club students vanish, or really any of the students, if they don't know what they're doing. Like I tell them at the very beginning, like I'm going to be throwing you in the fire, especially for football season. Like you don't know what you're doing. And this is something we really worked hard on last year, getting our SOPs in place with the help of Hoosier and Taylor. And so now I'll actually show you guys an example of what one of our SOPs look like here in a little bit. But I'm hopeful that that will give some students who don't know what they're doing, or they show up and be like, I have no idea where to even go or get started. They will help kind of transition them, getting them into a place where they can feel more successful even at the very beginning. Because I tell them, I'm like, I can show you how to run a camera. I can set up a tripod for you, but until you actually do it, you're not going to remember all the steps and processes along the way. You might remember a piece or two here, but you're not going to remember the entire setup. So we built those SOPs with the help of Hoosier and Taylor, like I said, and I think those are going to be really helpful. We really hit the end of the year just trying to knock those and nail those down. And the last couple, probably month, I'd say, we got to dive into them and see what the kids really knew and didn't know. And then we found a lot of gaps that we thought we had complete and ready to roll, but we're like, this kid still has no idea what's going on. We need to fix it. So, and then Hoosier, you want to talk a little bit about certifications and how beneficial that can be?
Yeah, and I think before I do, just as you were mentioning SOPs, I was reading a book that Taylor, our team has. It's called Get Scalable, as my camera blur works to actively blur out the title of that. But I was just reading, and we kind of got this idea of SOPs from this book, right? And so it talks about, the one quote is like, um, I believe. So this is talking about like a trust breaker when you're in charge, and like why good team members who genuinely care sometimes waste time interrupting with questions that they should already know the answer to, right? So you can imagine your students. Let's say you've had a student for 2 years, and yet they still tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I've got a question about this." A lot of times, it's not that you don't trust them, right? You as a teacher, especially the two of you on this call right now, you trust that your students know what they're doing a lot of the times. The problem is sometimes the students don't trust themselves, right? They care so much they don't want to make that mistake, right? Or you get the oops, my bad, like I accidentally didn't set it up right. Or sometimes there's what they call the black box. And we'll kind of get into that one a little bit more later about sometimes there's just someone who always does it and they don't share how they do it. And so that knowledge always stays with them, right? So you have a director, and let's say that person basically learned how to do it on their own. Well, if that knowledge just stays with them, you know, you'll never recover that, right? And so these are all like the trust breakers that are leading into why you should actually make playbooks, and why they're worth it. And so I just thought it was good. I just happened to be reading that chapter last night, which I thought was very timely because I was like, wait a second, we're talking about some of that tomorrow, right? Um, and so as you're doing this, the onboarding gap, right? Like the beautiful thing about the standard operating procedures, and Jordan, since you've just built them, I think what you're going to find next year is that you can then use those as a training documentation, right? They're not just a reminder and a tool for students that currently know what they're doing. They're a great checklist, a great reminder of, hey, this is what we're doing. But then you can just hand that document to the new students and say, here you go. Here's how you set up the camera. And what you're going to find in that is, hey, maybe this is a student who doesn't know anything. And those are the best students to test the documentation because they don't just come in with, here's the quick fix if this way doesn't work. They literally only know the way that your standard operating procedure, your playbook is telling them to do it. And so those are the best ones to test it. And so
And that's where
there
we
was a
found
lot
the,
in there. Yeah, go for it.
that's where we found those gaps, one that you were just talking about. Like we had the kid that had no idea what was going on try it, especially at the end of the semester when I was running. These kids had not been to very many events and near needing events, and so they ran into, oh, I don't, what does this mean, or why, what do I do after this step? Because it's not really telling me what I need to do. So that's exactly very good there. Good information. Trey, what what has made you go from 6 to 10 or 12 this year? Do you have any thoughts or ideas, or what made that maybe happen?
Well, yeah, I mean, having a I've been lucky enough where my group has always been part of a class. I was able to convince my admin pretty much right when I took over our media program 5 years ago. So that's been a blessing. But as far as getting more kids to take the class, I mean, I really structure especially my broadcasting class. I guess all three of my media classes as a job, and I make it known to the wider student population. But like when I say that, it sounds like, oh, your class is a job, like you just work and work and work, and there's no, I guess, fun. But like I try to just with a job, like if you um, work really well and you're making really great strides in your position and growing as a professional, there can be incentives at the end to do that. And so I've been really big on trying to figure out incentives in my classes and rewards. And so, like every month in all three of my media classes, I got these plaques made for the kids where like there's different awards on each plaque, and so I have them nominate each other, and I also nominate a few kids once in a while for the awards we have on those plaques. And then if enough people nominate them, and I choose who gets the awards. And so every month there is some sort of incentive for them to do well and to get excited. And so if they get that award, they get to sign our plaque. I have them hanging in my classroom, and so they're kind of immortalized, I guess, for that award. And that's really cool concept for them. And then I also print off some sort of like frame with at least a graphic or photo for them to kind of commemorate that award that they get to keep. And so that's kind of spread, and a lot of kids think that's really cool. And so I think that's those type of incentives and fun things that they get to take part of in their classes. Sorry. That's helped bring more kids in. Oh yeah, there's a picture right there. Thanks for pulling that up. So that's been really cool. And then I mean, just the experiences that they know they get to take part of. Like they love going to Pinnacle Bank Arena for state basketball. They love to be involved in that kind of stuff. And so I think a big thing for kids is like if they can see the real application in your classes for things that they can maybe do in the real world, which obviously we do. You can take any of the skills that we learn in our classes out into any career, but then making it fun for them too. And so, um, yeah, it's one thing to have a class and you're gonna get kids in some form because it's a class, but yeah, I've had to really think of ways over the past year or two to really try to get more kids to enroll in the classes, and I think those things have really helped. And so, yeah.
No, that's good stuff. I remember seeing that plaque thing come through on the community, and I remember seeing it, but you talking about it was like, wow, that is a lot better than I even realized. Like that really be motivational and powerful could be, for sure. I'm gonna have to think about doing something like that myself. So thanks for that, Trey. Appreciate that. Nathan, you may, or Huser, you may even want to see if we can make something more generic across the whole community on something like that. I love that idea. Maybe even spotlight that thing for Trey as we start back to school. I don't even know. I really like that idea, and it didn't even have to be a plaque necessarily. It could be a piece of paper to start with, and pictures and kids' names on it. So I think I'm gonna have to implement something like that. I like it. Like it, like it, like it. All right. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Hoosier. So does time in the program mean more responsibility? This is a fun one. Because I'm now to the point where I've got enough kids that they've been there for 2 or 3 or even now 4 years. And so they think that they are the big man on campus, and doesn't mean that they're always the hardest working person on the crew or even the know-it-all. So I learned that in a really fun way, which I kind of already knew was going to happen, but they learned it in a real fun way, I should say. Last year I had 2 years ago, I had 14 kids graduate from my program. And so last year I had 3 seniors. And so I had a ton of new freshmen who had no idea what they were going into. Their very first week, and we got into football season and all that fun stuff. So the returning student problems, where I'm going to start with. Students from last year feel like they own the room. How do you honor that while opening roles to the new people? First off, I started by having those returning students try to train the kids without the SOPs, because we didn't have them built yet. And it was funny to watch the freshmen be like, these kids have no idea what they are doing. Now, I also introduced a virtual class, so a lot of my returning kids that were really involved and knew what they were doing were in the virtual class because they paid attention during scheduling time and heard that I was going to do it virtually. But some of the ones that were not, who work quite a few games still, or maybe just work the cameras and don't want to get on the other parts of the role. I'm like, all you've ever worked is camera guys. And then they couldn't set up the camera when it came that fall and trying to show kids like how to do it. And the one was like, well, it's always just set up for me. I'm like, well, that's the problem. Someone's setting it up for you. It's not me most of the time. But someone has set this up for you, and you just take the tripod handle and move back and forth. So it's kind of eye opening for them. And it was funny to watch the freshmen be like, you guys have no clue what's going on. And so when Hoosier and Taylor came down for the workshop, one of even my freshmen that I didn't really like see as a leader, he goes out there and just nailed it out of the park. Hoosier and Taylor just ranting and raving about this kid. And I'm like, I talked to him very little. And so it was kind of neat to see like there's ways to get those kids, especially those newbies, into real roles that matter and important. And then also trying to keep those returning students excited and happy and say, hey, these freshmen are exceeding the expectation we have now, especially that you guys have set. Now, how are you going to also grow and contribute? So that was kind of a fun one for my kids to see and be like, oh, I really don't know what I'm doing. And so one of them actually worked the semi-professional Ozark Lunkers indoor arena football with us and still had no idea how to set up the camera. So I'm like, interesting. And he just always had someone else do it for him. And he'd show up and run it back and forth. He did a great job on camera, but never really took the time and effort to do it until I made him in front of about 6 or 7 of his freshman peers and be like, oh, hey, look, I don't know what I'm doing actually. So that was really fun to see. And then they were a big contributor to the SOPs because they're like, we don't know what we're doing. So that was kind of neat. Role versus task. A task is complete, a role isn't owned. So programs only work when students own and not just execute. And so that's where the SOPs are a lot of tasks. And so we got to figure out a way now as I'm working on this, like now that this task is complete, you've got everything done. How can we make that role and make it emphasize and make it look better? And I think that SOP is going to help with that. Like, yes, it's a bunch of tasks to get started with, but that's going to set them up for success going into the events. And so then they're going to have more fun with it. They're going to know their equipment's working, all of that fun stuff. And then they'll be able to try some new things, be creative on cameras or add new graphics up, replays. So they're not just executing the button because we told them, hey, I need a replay at least once this half. I want to see 4 or 5 of them. And so I think that the tasks are just complete and they're not going to be anything fun and exciting, but I think that's going to lead to them building their role and wanting to contribute more to that position. So we'll see on that one for sure. The class reality, club reality, you can assign, but buy-in matters even when you hold the grade. So in the class, like we have that a little bit of accountability with the grade. Assignments without the buy-in is compliance and not ownership. Like that's the big kind of key there. Like, and I've got kids that they will just do what they have to get that grade, and say, hey, where's my 50 points or whatever it is for that event, and not actually just own that position and be like, let's move this to the next level and make it even better. And I've had plenty of kids throughout the year, even when I was in the club space and now class, that they have taken that ownership and have grown it. And that's why we are where we are. So club reality, you have to earn that buy-in before anyone goes anywhere. Assignments without the buy-in means no shows on game nights. And we would have that same reality when it was a club. People would say, hey, yeah, I want to go, but I had nothing to hold them there, and they would end up no showing. And we even had this even in the class realm. Kids were signing up for events. I learned my lesson last year, or not this last school year, but the year before, where I put all the events out at the very beginning of the year for the sport, whatever it was. And so kids were signing up for some of them almost 3 months in advance. And so then they get closer to the time and they realized, oh, I'm actually busy. But I thought I wasn't 3 months ago type of thing, or now I have a job and I can't work those. And so we were getting some of those no shows. And so last year I changed it up. So it opens basically 2, sometimes 2.5 weeks, depending on where it works in the week, before the class or before the event. So they have a much better understanding of what's going on. And that was just one of my unknowns and failures. I just want to get everything out there so people could see it and do it. And it's still out there. They can still see when it is. They just can't sign up until those 2 weeks ahead of time. And so then they have a better idea what's going on. Everything drops on, it used to be Monday at 9 a.m. because I'm like, it needs to be during school day. And all the kids threw a fit. Now that they can have their phones, for sure, it was harder for them. So my officer team came to me and said, hey, we want to move this to Sunday at 3. So it's a more open time for most people. And so now it's Sunday at 3. And that was a student initiative drive that my officer team came to me with this year. And they're like, it's hard for us to pay attention. Like if it's in the middle of math class, we're not going to be able to sign up for it, even though we really want it. And so they're like, we want to have a more fair opportunity. So Sunday at 3 is what they decided. So that was kind of a neat thing there. Hoosier, anything else on this one you want to chime in about? Or
Yeah, I just think when we talk about owning a role, right? I think Jordan, you alluded to it. It's not just completing the checklist, but a lot of times if the only thing that the students can spend their time thinking about is making sure they remember all of the tasks, that doesn't allow for their creativity, right? And so by documenting that, by saying here's your list of tasks, all of the sudden now you freed up a large part of what their brain can actually spend creativity thinking on. Um, and adapting to things that happen, right? We also don't want to get them so dependent on a checklist as well, right? Because there are going to be things that just happen, and some of it has to kind of start to be instinctual or using critical thinking to solve problems. But yeah, I think with the whole question that we led this off with, does time in the program mean more responsibility? Look at it exactly like a sports team, right? There are high school teams that the freshman is the starter, just based on skill and responsibility and ability to handle the pressure. Because when you're broadcasting, even at the high school level, there's a certain amount of pressure that comes with it. There's a certain level of responsibility. Like, we want to provide a good product to the viewers at home that represents our school well. I even to this day, and I've done how many broadcasts, I still get a little nervous. Like, if I know I got a game at like 7 o'clock, I start getting a little bit of pregame jitters at 8 a.m. Like, as soon as I wake up, it just hits me like, hey, we got a game tonight. And now I've turned it into excitement, like a happy, good anxiety. Like, I'm ready for this. But when I started, it was like, oh, we got a game tonight. Like, am I prepared? Can I do it? And so your kids are probably feeling that, right? Um, Even though as time goes on, I get further and further removed from being a student in high school having those experiences, I still am a lot closer than all of the teachers on this call to being a student. No offense to you guys. But I'm young. And so I get it. And especially at state events, like, that's the one thing is we lead our crew of students. And this is sometimes it's a brand new thing for them, not new to broadcasting, but the big stage, the big arena, the lights can get to students at state events too. And I just remind them, hey, this is just like your normal broadcast. We're doing a couple more things, but we gave you the training. We listed stuff out, right? We have prepared you so that you can walk into this moment. And then I just spend my time being available and answering the questions for them, right? And I think that's what we can get to as building student-led programs, is understanding that there will be kids who are absolutely on it, right? They've got it. They are like, I follow my SOPs. I know what I'm doing. No questions. What that allows you to do is then free up time as a teacher to look at the students who need a little bit more of that help, right? They still can follow the SOPs, but they're still a little unsure, right? And so by having all of this documentation stuff in place, it's not eliminating the shoulder taps or the questions, but it is helping to eliminate some of the ones that could very easily be answered through a different solution, right? And so that's the benefit of having this, of letting students own a role, especially if it's the same role that they own, game after game after game, is they're just going to grow into that, right? And you're allowing them to, yes, pick an avenue at the beginning. And so, yeah, I think a little bit of credit goes to seniority, but I know that even as a senior, I recognized there were certain jobs like I am terrible at operating a broadcast camera that's like a main camera. I am not steady enough. I don't have the attention span to just do kind of one thing. Now I'm a fantastic director. I can punch to all the different camera shots. I can announce. I can even run the floor camera or an ISO cam. But the main camera is my weakness, right? Um, and it's because I never ran it. And so when I was on my broadcasting crew, my greatest strength was announcing. So I announced, and I found a student that was a sophomore that was really good at running a main cam, right? And so at that point, there was no seniority. It was just they were better skilled at it. I couldn't do all of it, and I needed help, right? And that's the same way your programs are. You need the help. The students are the help. Um, and we've now turned it into their thing to empower them, to give them the ownership. So, um, yeah, that's my long-winded thoughts there, Jordan. So,
I'd also say on that too, that also kind of leads to your, what do you call that? Chain of command. You had some older students that may know, like there was one crew, I think Hoosier was laughing at me a couple times about this story, but we walked over, the camera wasn't turned on, wasn't working. The reason it wasn't turned on because there was no battery in it. And so I walked over and I said, nope, I'm not helping you guys with this. You can find someone else to help you. And so they had to go find some other students to go through. And so I'm at my stage now going through and like, hey, go have the chain of command, go ask someone else who may know what's going on. Then go ask one of your officers. And then if one of the officers doesn't know how to do it, then those officers can come to me and I can deal with the more important things, and the stuff that should be fixed rather easy, like a battery not in all the way or no battery at all. And what this situation was, like sometimes the batteries get in there stuck kind of crooked and they don't actually get plugged in. And so how can each student work with each other to troubleshoot some of those? Like in the SOP, we don't have in there, make sure the battery's plugged in all the way correctly. Like that's not on there. So that's something they could trip up on. It does say grab a battery, but it doesn't necessarily say which way to put it in, all right, all that kind of stuff. And so there are opportunities for the students to fail and trip up. And so having that kind of chain of command, having those students, that may give them a little more accountability too. Like I'm an upperclassman, I've done this before. What actually is wrong with this camera? I've worked it 4 or 5 times now, but I don't necessarily know what's wrong with it. Let's see if I can troubleshoot it. And then if they don't, we can work our way up the ladder until they get to me. But that's kind of a one that's interesting to see. And like I said, Hoosier laughs at me most of the time when I tell him that story. So it's a good one for sure. You want this
well,
one or you want me?
I'll get this one. Well, and I think part of it is if it becomes a frequent enough issue, then you put that into your SOP. Eliminate it. Yeah. To us with experience, plugging in the battery the right way is absolutely the easiest thing to do. However, we were setting up at one of our events, and one of our students, who's now helping us on the audiovisual side a little bit, so I'm going to put him on blast without saying his name. He plugged the power into the wrong port in the camera, right? And so, yeah, the battery was charged with about 15 minutes. So after setting it up, about 15 minutes in, it died, and I'm like, "You plugged it in, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I go and look. Well, on this specific camera, there is 2 ports that look very similar. The plug will go into both, but only one of them delivers power. And so I was like, I can see how you made the mistake. However, let's clarify, and should be something that we double check next time we use this camera is it in the correct power port? So anyway, that's kind of my last thought on that. But here's one of the biggest things that we've talked about, and we did a spring sprint over this of kind of what if your student graduates, right? Where does all that knowledge go, right? And I'm going to humble myself while at the same time brag on myself. So this is going to be interesting. So be prepared. I don't do this often, but I was the best student in the broadcast program at Sutton at the time. I'm not saying there aren't kids that are as good as me or better than me, right? We're all uniquely talented, but at the time, I was the one heavily invested, and obviously that's led to obviously where I'm at right now. When I graduated, I personally did a poor job of telling other people how to run stuff. And so naturally I move in for the fall semester of my 1 year in college, and the first game night comes around or game week, and I'm getting texts and calls from the teacher being like, "Hey, how do we set this up?" And I'm like, "Oh." I was like, "I didn't document that or anything." Um and I didn't. And so there I was, kind of like a dog with tail between the legs, going back to my high school being like, I should have showed you this. And so, uh, from that point, that has been a driving factor behind me pushing, like, you need to have stuff written down, because too often I see programs that were really good, and then that one student leaves. And yeah, that student might have been, kind of a generational talent per se, or, it just came naturally to them. But that doesn't mean that your program's never going to produce another one of those students, because that student started somewhere basic. Like, I started just learning how to run, the software that we use is Wirecast. And this was, we had one kind of image to put, we'd switch to an image without the camera shot, then we'd switch back to the camera and the scoreboard. And it was the most basic thing. And that's how I first started to learn. And I went more and more into it. And I just kept learning year over year and talking to different people, and making connections with other students. And they're like, this is what I do. Or I'd get, Eric Allgood. He basically mentored me in the world of announcing. It was like, okay, I learned all this. Then I got the job with Strive, and I kept doing state events, and I got put in like directing roles and all of that. And so it all built, right? But now I'm very head down focused on documenting that, so that when your student leaves, it doesn't ruin the program, because there are many, many more kids that will be impacted, right? And that's just the thing. And, basketball programs have this set up, and I know basketball programs because my dad's a head coach, and so I know it well, right? When you have a basketball program, especially the one in the town I'm at, they have an elementary program, so that, kids are starting to play basketball from a young age. They go into junior high, they go into, they get to the, high school level, so then they're playing maybe freshman games, JV, varsity. You have a way that students can start at the beginning and work all the way up. And it doesn't matter if it's a class or a club, right? Because then I think, on the other hand, FFA, right, as an organization, you could start out as, they've got their green hand officer team and their actual FFA officer team, or you can just be a member, but you work and you complete projects and you meet criteria to apply for leadership. And there's a cycle that goes on of new kids coming in, and the program doesn't just stop once your best FFA student leaves or your best basketball player leaves. Things keep going. And so we're trying to build this, in the business world we would call it a flywheel, right? Something that just keeps going around and around and around. We're trying to build that with programs, right? And so writing it down, capturing institutional knowledge, when you have students do it and students build those standard operating procedures, they're the ones that are hands-on, right? In the book that I was mentioning earlier, Get Scalable, the person that should be creating the playbooks are the ones that are actually doing the thing. So if you as the teacher are not hands-on with the camera every broadcast, you should not be the one making the camera setup steps. Now, you can observe, you can watch them, you can make sure that they're actually getting it right. But it should be your student that is running the main camera every night that is writing down the steps. And then you have to actually make them available, right? So once you have the standard operating procedures, your playbooks created, make sure that they can actually be used, right? Because it does no good. And I think it's either in the next slide or the one after that, Jordan has an example of where his live, but they live digitally online where students can access them, right? They don't just live in a Google Drive folder that only you as the teacher have, and you have to go in there and pull up the file and share it with a student, right? The student needs to have access to it without you. And then that gets your program to a place where one of my favorite posts I've done in Future Ready Educators, and it's primarily because Trey's on this call right now, but I was at a McCool Junction game. Our two teams played each other, um, and I was sitting across from the broadcast crew, and all the students are up there doing the work. They're bringing the broadcast, and then I see Trey sitting. Usually they're in the front row or the second row with his family, right? And I was like, that's the picture. That's the world that I want to help other teachers create and get to live in. Not saying that every game you're going to get the luxury of just being able to sit back and watch, right? Trey's shaking his head no. He's like, yeah, that doesn't always happen. But more often than not, we want it to be student ran. And it not only does it give you as the teacher pride, like, hey, I trained this crew up really good and they can handle themselves. But it also does give you a couple nights off. And like Jordan was saying, he's like, 147 broadcasts, I think was the number. Like, you weren't at all of them. And so that's the goal with this is we get it student built. We put students in a position of leadership. We talk about building up, levels of like who to go and at like a chain of command, right? When you have all of those things in position, then you as a teacher can become more hands off, and you can look at the program from a whole, right? In pilot or airplane terms, a 30,000 foot view, right? And so I think that's super important. Is like you're the teacher that has to have that outer view, right? And so one of the things, when we go to the other half of this slide, right, where what the data says about your program, like if you're a class and you want to build SOPs, make it an activity, make it be like one of the first things, either the first thing you do at the beginning of the year or the last thing you do at the end of the year. And I know we are past the end of the year because we're in the middle of summer. So if you want to do something this year, get together, have what you would call a setup day, whether you have to do it as an after school activity, it takes 45 minutes or however long it takes, but get all your gear together and set it up. And after you set it up, document the process. And if you can't document it afterward, if you can actually document it while you're doing it, that's even better. But if you can't document it while you're doing it, do it immediately after while it's still fresh in their mind of every single step that they took, because that's the most important. If you're a club, right? Here's one of the things that the Scalable book said was like, think about what your most important things are that you have to have and document those first, right? If you don't really run graphics, but you do it on occasion, like on some of the bigger games, do not document that process first. One of the things that you always set up is your camera. Document that first, right? Start thinking in the order of priority of like, what do we actually use the most? And don't feel like you have to have them all created at the beginning, right? Jordan, give me a nod if you still have some that you haven't created yet.
Yep, still have some I haven't created, and we're still in the process. You talked about that after school thing. We've done ours throughout the school year, or really the second semester, I should say, and it's been probably 10 days total over 2-ish months is what we've kind of been doing. So we've just kind of, what I did is had every group, or multiple groups, I should say, have a single role that they were responsible for. So this is one way I set up my activity. Had them set it up, write it all down, document it, and then I said, all right, hand that off to another group. And so that other group had to read it. And I said, this is just like your class in college that you're going to take, public speaking, where they're going to tell you like, hey, how do you document, how do you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich thing? And you're going to have to say it out loud type of thing. And I said, just play dumb, read exactly what it says and do exactly what it says to do. And so a lot of them realized, oh, I've got a few gaps there, and they would laugh and giggle and like, why did I completely miss this entire step? And so that was an interesting thing for them. And then I said, all right, I want you guys, anything that you see that they're missing or is confusing, write it down. And so then I had them hand that back to the original group, and the original group had to go back through and document and fix their documentation. And so that was kind of a fun activity. And then we got to the point where I would, well, just because I don't teach just broadcasting, I have intro to business, personal finance, keyboarding, all sorts of other fun stuff. I would have some random kid in one of my other classes take it and try it in the back of my classroom. I'd never seen, touched, or done anything with it. And I usually try to find kids that I'm like, hey, I want to recruit you and try to get you into my class. So I would pull those types of kids sometimes and be like, see if this makes sense to you. And if it doesn't, what was wrong with it? And so they've never touched anything. And so it's kind of neat to see them do it. And then I would document it and be like, hey, class, here's where a brand new kid never touched any of it um, fell short. And so we've continuously updated it, and ours are much longer now and much more detailed than they used to be because of that. But it was just me going through different activities. And I'm sure this year we'll change some of our equipment up or make some upgrades or additions, and we'll have to continuously refine that SOP or change the way the SOP reads and does. So that was kind of the activity I do. I also make that kind of at the end of the semester, I made that a quiz where the kids had to set up one of the other SOPs, documentation steps, or get the position ready to roll. And so a lot of them, I said, it's your other classmates' grade that are depending on how you write these things down. And so I was pretty light on the grading. Like if they missed a step and they couldn't figure it out, like I'm going to get you guys for it and not the kids that are setting it up. But those are all different kind of activities you can throw in class and do, and not going to hurt anything for sure. And so it can help build that program accountability, all that fun stuff, especially when it gets down to crunch time and something's not working, other people can help assist and get that working. So that's the big one there. And then I would also say, sorry to cut you off there, Hoosier, those SOPs we started building by the last probably month of school, we had some of them in place. And some of our veteran kids thought they were too good for the SOPs. And so they were trying to set stuff up. And I'm like, no, you need to follow the SOPs. So getting your crew in a rhythm to using them night in and night out. I think you guys did a great job with that at state basketball, having them get into the broadcast ops playbook and kind of getting those documented steps in place. And so I'm going to work on making that happen this year for me, to where every kid's getting on their SOP, getting it documented, getting it all checked off, and then hopefully ready to go live for showtime. So
Yeah, and I think the one last thought on standard operating procedures, because we could talk about this for a long time. Um, in fact, we have multiple times. There is such a thing as digital dust on standard operating procedures, right? Do not let them sit unupdated for more than 90 days. And if I were doing this in a school setting, I would make it, there is, at least here in the state of Nebraska, a little bit of a gap between your fall sports season beginning and your winter sports season beginning and your spring sports season beginning. Take an opportunity during that gap to review them. And even if you make zero changes to them, at least go through the process and say, hey, we have updated this, right? We have confirmed that this is still accurate for the way our program works. And you might discover that your setup for football is different than your setup for basketball, right? That can happen. Especially as you're going from doing maybe an outdoor, it's an outdoor sport, football, moving to your indoor space. And so maybe when you're creating standard operating procedures, you have one for football that's different than volleyball, because volleyball still gets played in the same gym. And so maybe your volleyball one is closer to what you actually do for basketball. Basketball, you change it up because you're going to have a few different camera positions. And so you can see the intricacies that you can go into as you're creating these. And so start basic, but make sure that you're always updating them. Because if you just let them go untouched, even within a sports season, you can find out that they might get out of date very, very quickly. So it's just always kind of a good practice to get into. And like I said, even if it's just putting a check mark that says, hey, we reviewed it, it's good to go, make that part of your routine. And it builds the skill in the students to always be in the mindset of thinking about, are we doing this the right way? Is this the best way to do it? And so that helps too. So Jordan, these are what your SOPs look like as they live in your student-facing sites. So I'll let you kind of walk through these here.
Yeah, so these, like I said, you can see a lot of detail went into these. We started building these. It was really in the spring, I think, right after basketball season. We started really trying to get these locked down and done. And so those 10 or so days of class over those 2 months, we started working on them. It was funny to watch the kids build these versus how they've turned out now, because a lot of the kids, they would have like paragraphs, like they were in English class writing every like a paragraph on how to gather all the equipment. It's like, I don't need to have a paragraph here. I need just a quick checkbox that I can say, yep, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. I don't want to read the whole thing. And so I took all the ones that they brought together, we threw it into AI, and then this is kind of how it turned it out. And then we would tweak these as we go. So I handed them the AI version, and there was a lot of things that he either skipped or didn't make a lot of sense on. And so then they would go through it again. This was another exercise we did during class. They would look it over, say, oh, this works good. This looks good. This doesn't make sense. And then we would update and tweak it. And so now we've got to a much more refined. And I even put in, and when I was writing in AI, I said, make this student friendly verbiage and language. And so hopefully it's that way. And we'll find out more for sure this fall, as a lot of these are going to get being rolled out officially. And I'm going to start honing in on the kids to make sure they're using them. But it's just a really good spot. I feel like I'm in a much better spot this year, especially with new people coming in. Like I can just say, hey, get on your app, get this going, and then go through it all, and let's get this thing live and ready to roll. My goal is not to have a lot of downtime still, but my hope is that we can get everything set up, ready to go, so we can add to our pregame show, add a few more special elements, even get some B-roll ahead of time that we can play out at various different spots throughout the game. So that's the goal with these. That's kind of an idea of what they look like. There's no right or wrong way to write an SOP. The kids, some of them had really good ideas. And like I said, some of them had those big long paragraphs, and it just looked like I was reading a book. And I'm like, that's really not what I want to see out of these. Some of them had some pictures that was really good, the document with them. And I am in the process of actually adding those pictures in. I just wanted to get all the text information there. And then you can see there on the replay, I've actually started adding some logos that weren't in there originally. And then there's pictures, especially with the camera op stuff, on how those look like, what that tripod level or knob looks like. That's the one that tricks them up the most underneath there, to twist that on and off. And so those are things that I'm going to add as a teacher, that the kids got it documented. Now I can enhance this by actually giving them a visual or even a video if it's something that's real confusing down the road. So that's definitely, these things are definitely active. They're not going to be ever complete, and I can take my hands off of them, kind of like you said, Hoosier, the 90-day thing. I can hopefully know that most of them are in good spots most of the time, and we can kind of give that check mark at the end of 90 days, but they're definitely going to be active and live, especially as we get new equipment. Like one tripod might look different than the other ones, type of thing. We've got a few of those. I wouldn't suggest that. I'd try buying the same brand so you don't have that problem. But I wasn't smart enough to do that back in the day. So I've got a few different styles of brands of equipment or tripods that drive me a little crazy sometimes. But yeah. Hoosier, you going to add anything to that? I don't know. That's not all of it. I mean, those are just pictures, so I can't really go through the process on it. But the big thing is it's all documented now. I should say there's a pregame setup. There's an end game on what the kids should be shooting, or their ideas, and then obviously let them be creative and try to get some fancier shots too if it deems necessary, or if the director thinks they're at that level, they can make that happen. But it definitely needs to have in there the essentials, like how you're framing the wide shot, how you're framing your hero shot or your tight shot. What are you actually looking at when you're doing a wireless camera for football versus a wireless camera for basketball? Those are all in there for our different positions. And then probably the biggest one, in my opinion, is the post game, like tearing down. Where does all of it go? Have you verified that everything is in your box, so the next person that gets it can be successful and ready to roll? Have you taken all your batteries out and got them on the chargers so we're not dead for the next game? And then all those types of things for post game. So I've got a pregame, an in game, and a post game on pretty much all of these. Replay is probably the biggest one that we've not tested out yet, but that's a work in progress, and it actually goes through in the post game. Like, I want a folder created with this file name or file, like the name of the teams, the dates, if it's varsity or JV, like it's labeled out like this is how I want the file name to look. And then I want inside of that file, I want this, and these 3 folders, and you're going to throw in your replay clips or whatever it might be into those 3 various folders. So it's very documented, very detailed on exactly what we want to look like. And right now, this year, they would do it, they would hit export, and then sometimes it would make it to Google Drive, sometimes it wouldn't. And so there was no, like, I had it written down as a file, like what we wanted it to look like. But it was not done like that very often. So it was just kind of sporadic and chaotic. And so I want to really hone in those ideas on that replay operator one, and we'll see if we can make that happen and get that rhythm of that SOP in there so that I'm not having to go in after the game or the day after when the new game comes up and having to clear out clips and all that fun stuff. Minutes before game time. Oh, we've got 2 minutes left on our replay. It's file space. Great. Just what I love to hear when we got a 4-hour game coming up. So those are things that hopefully will help us down the road. And some of those are in that replay one a little further down after they get everything set up, like check and see what is our replay time? How much space do we have on our computer? So those are all things you can throw in there.
Yeah, love it. Would be interesting as I'm just looking at this. If these like camera power cable tan battery, if those could be like hoverable and they're almost hyperlinked and that's where the picture of the item shows up, that would be a really cool way to integrate that in there.
Yeah, that'd be a really good idea. I hadn't even thought about that. So I love that. I'm getting all sorts of good ideas today. I'm gonna have a July busy month just trying to incorporate all these things, plaques and hovering and all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah. The unglamorous stuff. This is when we were reviewing this slideshow on Friday. The presentation we put together, I was like, "Oh, this is fun." This will hopefully resonate with a lot of you teachers. Even from my perspective, and I'll share this real quick while Jordan kind of recollects himself and gets ready to go through this slide. But I was telling him on Friday, I was like, I'm kind of not a happy-go-lucky guy. Like I do put in the effort, and I really like if I want it to work out, I'm gonna make it work out, right? Like I'm gonna move as much as I can to make something happen. And when it comes to state events, which is partially what I've kind of been in charge of, and now I've handed a little bit over to Taylor. But when I'm at a state event, I remember when I got to be there as a student and the way that it was such, I wouldn't call it magical, but it kind of like it's such a fun experience. And it's like the pinnacle of what you can kind of get involved in Nebraska in a high school broadcasting level is being able to, have your call. Like we had one of our students get their call on ESPN Top 10 because there was this huge moment. And I just saw that clip again recently, and that's been now two years ago, 2 tournaments ago. And so for me, it was always just this awesome time where you showed up, you're one of the best in the state and you got this opportunity, right? And there was not a lot of drama. Nobody fought. I know, however, that is not always the case when it's students who are peers that are in the same school. Sometimes there is stuff that happens. And so when it comes time to state and I have our crews there and they're like, they might start like a little argument. I'm just like, guys, I really don't have time for this. Like, this is fun. Let's not make this not fun. Because you're here at a Strive event, I do get to say it's my way or the highway or the interstate in the case of the fact that we're in Lincoln. Like, get on the interstate and go back home. I want the kids to be there to have fun. And I don't have time for the drama stuff, right? Like if you're going to show up, you've scheduled. The nice thing is with teacher involvement, it's not a problem. However, sometimes we have what I wouldn't call them lone wolves, but they're like solo people that their school doesn't have the rest of a crew that wants to come to state, so they want to kind of be pieced in wherever they can. And one of the things that has always been a struggle is sometimes there are people that will join that they know that they're the hot shot at their school. Um, I was one of those kids in high school. Again, talk about humbling myself. I was like, I'm the best. I'm the hot shot. This is what I do. I'm going to ESPN in like 5 years. Well, I'm not there yet. And it's been 5 years. However, um, as I've been humbled, I've realized that there are people that know more than me. And in the case of those many of the students that come to state events, I am now that person that knows more than them. And so I'm like, listen, if I tell you that we're doing it this way, it's because I've already been thinking about this is going to happen and this is what's next. And so if you're on the floor camera and you hear my voice come over the crew communication set, which it usually doesn't unless we really need something to happen, and I tell you to switch sides of the court, if your feet aren't moving within a second of me telling you that command, I'm going to say it again. And I'm going to say it again until you actually physically move yourself to the other side of the court. If I have to walk down there and drag you across, I will. But that's like, I don't have time for the drama. However, it seems like you as teachers, in your own broadcast problem, according to Jordan, have plenty of time for drama. So, Jordan, why don't you talk about the unglamorous stuff, the stuff that I fortunately get to keep myself usually pretty far away from?
Yeah, so I mean, we get these kids all year long, even some of us 4 years long, and so there are definitely going to be conflicts throughout that time. And so again, to reiterate, class first club, like there's a difference there, and you can hold your kids a little more accountable in the class just because of that grade, but doesn't mean they have that ownership. The club, same type of thing. Like if you can get them involved and excited, you're going to have a real strong group. But my story, I actually for this year built an officer team. It was back in probably October, November-ish time frame. And so I had an application out there, had kids apply. I end up having a 9 total for my officer team. And so we went, I think it was in January during tournament champions, or maybe right before that, our big tournament that we get to host, or we don't host, but we get to run. It's hosted elsewhere at Missouri State. But we had a conflict between one of our freshman officers who ran into this. I don't ever get any of the roles that I want, but I am more than capable of doing any of these positions. Everyone has these. Like, she was really wanting announcing, is what it was, and the announcers were like we had to earn our way to get to these games and get to do these types of things. Even various other positions, we've had issues like that. And so she, in one of our meetings, just was like, I don't feel like I'm respected. I don't get to do any of these roles. And so some of the officers were like, she's not even ready for them. Like, we haven't even seen her in a non-varsity game to know if she's even capable of doing everything she's saying she would like to do and knows she can do. And so it's kind of humbling for her. We let her get a couple positions second semester, and things did not go the way she thought they would. Like, it was much more stressful to be an announcer. There was a lot of dead downtime because she didn't know what to say. She didn't do her pregame work like a lot of the other kids do. So she didn't know what to say in a moment when she needed to fill that gap. And so those were kind of those things that, like, there are definitely drama between. And a lot of the officers like, well, we need to drop her from the officer team, or we need to get her just out of the class completely. And that's one of those things, like, as a teacher, like, no, we're not going to get rid of her. Like, it's a good life lesson for her, and she still needs to be a part of this. Now, does she need to have a different role? Probably so. And hopefully she could learn from that and get back to that position that she wants to get to. But there is definitely drama between. I've had, especially since I have a ton of freshmen this year, just a lot of immaturity, just jealousy even sometimes, or just they want to work on a crew with this particular person, but they don't want to work on the crew because this person's on there, type of stuff. So that definitely happens, especially in the teacher world. Or I would say probably more so announcing than anything. Like, someone will sign up to announce and they're like, I do not want to work with that person. And so they won't pick that position or role or even work that night at all. And so then as a teacher, I'm like, I got to fill some of these gaps, that where there may not be a position that no one wants to work with this person, or how can you talk to that person and say, hey, we need to probably change how we do this or change our attitude or actions towards people in class so that people do want to work with you. Like there's games where I need help and assistance, and if you're on them, no one's signing up because the way you act to the crew or what you're doing during the time, or maybe you're a camera op, and or maybe you're the director even, and you've got um, someone who's not a very, or you're not a very good director or don't want to put the effort in, and so then all the cam ops are like, well, I don't want to work on that because he never puts my camera up because he's too focused on XYZ, playing on his phone, whatever it might be. So those are all conflicts that definitely happen through a class that aren't fun to talk about. But if you can recognize those ahead of time, kind of nip those in the butt, that helps a lot. And like I said, the kids are always, there's always one or two kids that they're like, hey, we need to get this kid out of here. He does nothing for us or never shows up. And so I think I kicked two kids out of the whoever knows hundreds of kids that I've had come through my program at this point. Um, and the only reason that was because they got themselves in trouble outside of the Nick's alive, or even outside of school for that matter. And I'm just like, the responsibility that we have here and the freedom that you get in our program, like I can't have you be a part of it. And so that's where, or they just no showed, or one of them told their parents they were at our productions and they showed that they were here, but they were never did show up and doing some inappropriate things that they shouldn't have been doing. And so they got caught finally. And so those are like a couple, I think I said two or three, maybe four kids that have been in that boat where I've had to say, hey, probably not for you, but it's not because it's not ever been an issue. Like, even though you're not quite doing your job, I still want you to be a part and I still want you to get better. Like, this is not a ESPN production where you're fired if you don't get it done right or it's not right. Like, our goal is to get you to grow. And there may be some growing pains that happens. Um, and that's part of it. And then finally, scheduling, the other one, like there are things that come up. Kids are kids, like they don't realize what their time commitment is on various things. Like even I'm that way sometimes. Like I'll get so overbooked and scheduled. I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna meet all these requirements. But those do happen. So making sure that you can have um time for those students to be students. I think Trey even talked about at the beginning, like let them get to that student section or whatever, giving them a break from time to time. Those are all important things. And so I've, like I said, I've gotten a big enough crew now that we have plenty of gaps, but there's some students that, like for the announcers, they work every single basketball game because they want to be there. They want to make it look good and they want to do every single game. And then you've got those other kids that we need to fill in and give some gaps and space, especially as they're growing and don't have those big time roles. And then the admin and parent layer, this is something I've dabbled into a lot more this year. I've added on my program a parent side so the parents can actually see when the kids are scheduled, how many points they're earning, and all that stuff outside of just like the grade book in general. And so that's been fun to see. It's been more fun to see when there's been students that aren't making it to games and needing events and needing points, and their parents are like, oh, here's the list of events that they can do. I'm going to get my kid signed up for this and this. And they can't sign the kid up. The kid's supposed to do it, but they're now on their tail trying to get them to come into events and not waiting till the last minute to do it. So they can see it all year long. And that one's been definitely a huge help to get no shows to come in. And even kids that are failing and not getting all the events they should, like getting them there and doing all that fun stuff. So that's been kind of a new layer for me. Trey, you have any fun stories on conflict or scheduling or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, especially in my first couple years just trying to figure out how to run all this, like I always had issues with kids saying they can work a shift and then all of a sudden, actually I've got work. Sometimes it actually was work that they forgot about, but there were plenty of times where a friend asked them if they could do something after school or something, and they decided they're gonna pretend that they have work or something like that. And so I've really had to I've had to kind of be pretty blunt with my classes over the last couple years. with like, if you're in this class, this is your responsibility, like this is broadcasting. You have to be at the games. And so make that clear to your parent right away, and make that clear with your own expectations. I mean, they are when school starts. ev- all of our high school students have a 2-week period where they can drop a class if they would like to. And so I always tell them, like, you've got until this day to really decide if you want to be here. And does that scare me a little bit on the inside? A little, because like I don't want to end up with 3 kids because then that just sucks. But for the most part, like that's actually created a lot of really cool buy-in, because I mean, yeah, I've maybe lost 1 or 2 kids from having that conversations, but I've still ended up with a really solid crew that I've been able to work with. And so the kids that want to be there, they will stay. And that's been such a really like nice thing for me, because I know I have kids in my class that actually want to be there and do well. And then I also tell them at the beginning of every year, like, I've been fortunate enough to work with my guidance counselor of like, I will let any kid try any of my 3 media classes at least once. And I'm straight up with them at the beginning of the year. Like, I am watching you guys all year. Like, I'm paying attention to your work ethic. I'm paying attention to your communication. I'm paying attention to all those important things. And if by the end of the year, I feel like you have not stepped up to the plate, I'm sorry, like, I'm gonna tell my guidance counselor I don't want you in my media class. It's an elective. You don't need it to graduate. So, I'm sorry. Like, that's the reality. I cannot stress myself out with all the things I got on my plate with kids that don't wanna actually be productive. And so I've just this last year, like, I told my guidance counselor, I've got 2 kids that I don't want back in my yearbook photography class because they're just there to just screw around. And it's led to some tough conversations once in a while, but it's been for the better of our program, and they understand. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective and my practice on it.
Look at Trey laying down the law. I love that. It's just, yeah, that is awesome. And I have to remind myself sometimes that not everyone can be as passionate as I am, as I was as a student. Because from my perspective, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life, right? Um, and so when something came up, like my dad's the head basketball coach. To pursue broadcasting, I didn't play basketball on my dad's team. Like I gave stuff up to do broadcasting. So in my mind, everyone else should be sacrificing everything else to do broadcasting, right? And that was what I came into very naive when I was in high school. I was like, I don't understand these other kids that are like, I have a job. I'm like, no, broadcasting's my job. Like I might not be getting paid for it right now, but it's going to be my job, right? But yeah, recognizing that not everyone is like me, and that's okay. Um, right? Because for me, it wasn't even necessarily, talk about a smooth transition. It wasn't necessarily the grade that got me in the room. It was oh, I can go live. Like I can broadcast. I cared so much about the thing. I was like, I'll do it for free. I'll do it if I get paid. You give me a free t-shirt, I'll drive all the way down to Nixa and put on a workshop. Like it doesn't matter. I'll do whatever. I paid $70 to golf in a golf tournament over the weekend just to come in last place. And they actually gave me my money back because I came in last. I was like, hey, this was awesome. I got 18 holes of golf for free. Like that was all I had to do was be bad. I'll do that anytime, any weekend. Let me do that. Um, but no, for students, trying to figure out how to motivate them, how to get them to succeed, and how to recognize them, right? Like again, the statement, a grade can get them into the room, but it cannot make them care about the show. Um, I have yet to figure out how to properly motivate other students besides just telling my story, right? Um, I believe that when I show excitement and encouragement and engagement, it you know kind of rubs off on other people, right? Like it's infectious. Like when I visit my local high school, and I'm talking about like, man, it was so cool. Like when I got to do this as a kid, I see like the other students in that classroom, like their eyes light up, and like we want to like get back to that level where there was really good announcing, there was great camera work, and it was multicam and stuff like that. Like they want to get it back to that, and so that's the way that I have typically encouraged students. But of course, I call myself the cool guy who I get to visit classes and be there for like an hour or two and be like, "Hey, what's up? It's Hoosier from Strive. Like this is the guy everyone wants to see." Because all of your kids, if they're in a class, are stuck with you all year. And so, Jordan, I'd be interested to hear, and I know we're gonna break another record for length of of webinar. So maybe in an expedited manner, kind of talk about some of the things that you have done as a teacher to kind of encourage those students and maybe make them care about the show. How do you get them to care about the show?
For me, I ask them a lot of questions, so they can. I will get them trained up and let them get their position and filled out, and then I'm like, "What can you do for us next?" So they'll be sitting there on their position, whatever it is, and then I'll just go up to them and say, "What about trying this?" Or what can we do to make this part better? And so that's is me just really asking a lot of questions or throwing in little tidbits that say, "Hey, this could emphasize it, make things look a little better," and they'll try it and usually like it. And it's really just that buy-in. I feel like you can't make them do it, but if you let them try it once or twice and they see the excitement and they get their spot live, they're going to be a lot more apt to making sure that happens again. Especially with the directors that I've got, like every, anybody can click a show. Like you can go to cam one, you can go to cam two, but it's how do you make that story kind of come to life? And that's where it gets exciting on the director side of things. Same thing with announcing. Like you can say the players' numbers and what happened, but how do you bring that storyline into there? And I'd even say the same thing with cam ops. Like you're supposed to shoot this particular thing, but how do you make it artistic and creative down the line? And so that's the big one for me. I would say trying to just get them to get to the next level, and then as they get to the next level, they'll want to try then level after that, level after that. It's almost like a video game. I'm living a real life video game. All right, how can I get player one, two, and three, and four to all level up for me? Um, and then I would also say my biggest struggle here on the failure side is the growing pains. Like there was times, positions where I would have too many kids on a crew, just trying to get them to learn and grow, and they get to a position that I never got time for, it never worked, especially our PTZ operator. Like I would just throw someone in there and like they never got used very often. It was boring for them. Um, Video board, same type of thing. Like you can make video board as fun as you want by putting graphics up, but if you're just going to sit there and do nothing, you're probably not going to come back or not going to want to be a part of the crew or make something fun. And so those are kind of the biggest ones, like making sure you have a crew, like you want to have maybe an extra person or two just in case, but having a role that they can be useful in is the more important thing so you don't lose them. And so I've lost a few kids along the way because I gave them positions and it was not fun to just sit there and do nothing or have a role that really didn't mean anything. And so even though I thought I was like, "Hey, I'm getting you on the crew, you're getting your points," like that's a good thing, right? It really wasn't. So that's where I would say on that one. How quick was that? Good enough?
I'm proud of you, Jordan. That was very good. That was expeditious. Is that a word? I think it is. If not, I made it up. Which is what I love to do on these streams. And just kind of here's the overarching topic that we've all of these the summer series, everything we talk about. If you have not worked with us at Strive Education, and everyone on this call has, but if you're watching this on a replay and you don't work with us, our biggest thing is letting the students own the work that they're doing, right? That's the frame we're going at it by, right? And so the goal isn't necessarily of all of these things to create a well managed program. It's to make a self managing crew. And there is a difference, right? A self managing crew with the chain of command in place doesn't immediately go to the teacher saying, "Hey, this broke. What do we do?" Right? they have a process that they follow. Hey, camera 2 is not coming into our switcher. What do we do? Well, they troubleshoot it first. And there's things put in place, and not Q&As, but what do you call it when you have like common troubleshooting, like a troubleshooting guide, right? There's stuff like that you have built into documentation so that they can go reference those documents and those guides when something stops working, right? And so it's all about, you want compliance because you want the students to follow the rules, but you want them to buy in. You don't want them just following the rules for the sake of following the rules. You want them following the rules because, hey, when we follow the rules, we follow the SOPs, we do everything right. We have a very successful broadcast. We create a fantastic product, and we are actually serving and helping people that cannot make it to the game get to watch the game, right? And again, the biggest question I want to challenge you with, right, is think about something that you are currently doing that in all honesty, if it seems insignificant to you, think about handing that off to a student. If it's still crucial to the broadcast, but it feels like it's a insignificant small task, take that, find a way to explain to another student how to do that, and then hand it off to them. Because I promise you, for that student, as long as you don't just flat out tell them, hey, this is too insignificant for me to do, don't use that verbiage. But if you hand it off to them and say, hey, this is crucial to our broadcast happening, and I believe that you can do it. If you hand that off to them, you're starting to have less on your plate. And the benefit of having less on your plate, I think of it like this. You got to have less of the small stuff on your plate to tackle more of the big stuff, right? And so it's the art of delegation. How can I take these things that somebody else in all reality could be doing, which is your students in your broadcast program? They could realistically be doing quite a bit of it. Now they can't manage your students. They can't manage the drama. Now they can have a say and opinion in it, but there are certain things that as a teacher, that's your specific job. But there's a lot of stuff that I think that a lot of our teachers do that if they just took the time to sit and think about it, they're like, ooh, if I audit my time, maybe I really could have my students do this. And so that's one of the things that I think is what I want to challenge us. And I'm going to kind of make it the yearly challenge, or at least the start of the school year challenge too, and the summer challenge for our teachers is what's something that you can hand off to your students? What's something that you're currently doing that you don't have to do, that somebody else can do, right? And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Like, again, we're here to experiment, to see what works, and we're here to share it with the community, right? And make everyone better. So the biggest thing is make it student-led as we wrap up here. Make it student-led, right? Give them the ownership. Because a teacher-ran program will break the moment the teacher isn't there, right? And there are times that we as people, we as teachers can't be there. I think about that with state events. I was just the slightest bit nervous when, for the first time this year, since there was a point where I was not at any of the state events Strive did, but then there was a point where I was the person in charge of all the state events that Strive did. And now I'm back to a place where I helped set up, but I was not there the first 2 days of the tournament of each of the sports. And I'll be honest, I know Taylor's very competent in what he does, and I knew he could handle it, but there was a part of me that said, is there still a piece of information I haven't, given that, am I holding it in a black box to where all of a sudden they're going to try to go stream Wednesday and they're not going to be able to because I forgot to say something. And it's been very good for me to see like, hey, I can do all of the work of setting up, here's how we do everything, and make that all documented and give it to people. And Taylor was able to make sure that all the students and all the crews did it. You as teachers, that helped the state events were able to have your students go through that and understand what was going on. And so Now I'm starting to get to the point, like, do I even need to be at state events? And the answer is yes, because I love them. So I'm always going to find a way to show up at the tournaments because I love sports. But we've gotten it to a place, which I think is really good, where the students truly are leading those broadcasts as a crew. And that's why we're so, all in on, like, we want one full crew of people. We want all people. And now Taylor is telling me that I am main camera for all the games. So I do have to be at all the state tournament games, I guess. I found myself a new job, which is fantastic. But the students really took the ownership of it. And I loved it the days that I was there, and just watching the students walk in and they're like, we know what we're doing. And I was like, oh, do you now? And they're like, yeah, you trained us. And I was like, I did do that. Right. And so if I trust my training, if I trust what I have created for those students, then I shouldn't have any need to worry. And I didn't. And all of our crews crushed it. Even the crews, there are a couple crews, I'll be a little honest, that I was like, this could be a little rough to start. And they absolutely blew me out of the water, right? Every time I set low expectations, I'm always amazed at, like, no, they actually can do it. And so I've took a piece of a humble piece of pie and was like, you know what? They can do it. And so don't doubt your students. I have a whole book on that. Teenage Rebellion Against Low Expectations. It's called Do Hard Things. Absolutely pivotal to me growing up. And it's like, now I'm in the position of encouraging young people, and I'm doubting them. I'm like, and I was the same kid that hated being doubted. I'm like, so I'm just doing it back to them. So I'm trying to be better by handing more responsibility off to our students at state events, and then learning the lessons from that and helping you as teachers do that to them as students in the classroom. That's how it all ties back. And so one of the ways that we're doing that is we are creating this summer what I'm going to call the Broadcast Excellence Program. It is modeled after a few different things that organizations have done. Basically, me pulling all of my favorite things about the models of setting a year-round schedule and how we can make things more basically repeatable in a broadcast program, and making sure it builds year over year. So I'm excited for next week's presentation, which we're going to be talking about program building, right? So we're going to tie it all together, how to get it to build year over year. And we'll have a little bit more information about some of the new things that we are building to help with that. Because again, that's the big thing, is all this work we're doing, if we were just doing it for a year, right? It wouldn't be worth the investment. But you're making an investment now to continue to build and continue to get better. And each student's going to benefit from it more and more and more. And the more people that we can get jobs, whether it's actually in the broadcast industry or, it's in some other industry where they've taken the skills that they've learned from this, I think it's super important. So again, breaking records for the longest call here. And so people are having to get off. I've got another meeting to get to, not urgent, but getting there. So if you're watching the recording and you made it all the way here, thank you for that. And joined by Jordan again. Thank him.
I got one more thing to add too before you leave.
Sure, go for it.
I had to come back home real quick, so that's why I had to leave. Sorry. First off, shout out to Trey, because I got to work with some of his crew at the basketball championship, and got to see and kind of ask those same kind of questions. I remember going down on the court for one of their wireless cameras and getting them, or just having the student like, hey, try this, or what do you think about doing this next time? And they knocked out of the park and got even better as the night went on. It was awesome to see. So that was one big one, I would say. And then also on your last slide, you guys had an awesome resource in the community. Time on what they do. Did I lose you? I may have lost you.
Yeah, cut in and out there a little bit. The time audit is what I think you're trying to say. I don't know if it'll come through on the recording, so I repeated it for you.
Yeah, that time audit, that was a fun one to kind of go through. And also some time a gut punch to be like, oh man, there's some things I do need to get rid of in my process. So that was a that was one thing I wanted you to mention for sure and talk about maybe a little bit.
Yeah, the time audit, just real quick on that. And I don't know, I forgot to grab the link to that, but it will be linked in the recording and in the stuff that we send out. But yeah, time audit is just sitting down and looking at all the things that you do and just listing out maybe 10 of the tasks and then deciding, hey, could this be student, you know, is this something I have to do? Is this something that could be handed off to a student, or is it something that should be handed off to the student? Anything that should be handed off to the student that isn't, that's what you attack first. That's what you hand them right away. If it should be, or if it could be, then you start to work and be like, is this feasible? Is there a way to do it? And then if it's something that you have to do, great. Keep that. Those are your responsibilities. But anything that a student should be doing, that was the biggest part of that time audit. And really, we found that about 60 to 70% of the things that our teachers were doing should be handed off to students. And so that's why we know that we're going down the right path of student-led broadcasting, because the students are capable of doing it. And ultimately what it's going to do is it's going to save you time as a teacher, right? By delegating, handing the stuff off and letting the students kind of go on their own path of exploration in these new things. So there's Jordan again. See his face one last time on the phone. So thank you, Jordan. For those of you who don't know, Jordan's been putting a lot of work in these slides and kind of helping out build out the content. So it's been amazing for me to have help in that area too, as I'm continuing to build other stuff to help teachers. So a massive shout out to him, and I can't wait to wrap it up with week 4. I think it's really going to be the thing that it's going to bring it all together. And so hopefully we don't go for 2 hours that time, but we keep going longer and longer. So who knows?
I know it's not good. Too funny though.
All right. Well, hopefully everyone has a great week. If you're watching the recording, thank you for watching, and tune in for the next one. See ya.
We'll see you.